In case you're tuning in from a place where you haven't seen the Harris Center before or come in contact with us, I just want to tell you a little bit about us. We're located in southwestern New Hampshire in Hancock, and we have been a land trust and education for conservation education for over 50 years now. And we do that through working in schools, preschools all the way up through high school and into colleges, community programs like this, and also land protection and conservation research. And tonight we have an exciting panel of people here to answer some natural history mysteries. Well said, Miles. All right, next up, I'll have Brett Thielen introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm the science director for the Harris Center. At these Ask a Naturalist events, I tend to answer amphibian questions and occasionally reptile questions as well.
Great, thank you, Brett. And heading right over to Phil Brown. Tell us about yourself, Phil.
Hi, everybody. I'm the Hawk Watch coordinator, and I'm also coordinating a broad-winged hawk nest searching project for the Harris Center this spring. Several volunteers and I have been out already looking for broad-winged hawk nests and activity. So I'm excited to answer some bird questions tonight.
Yay, thanks, Phil. And how about Jenna?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jenna, and I'm a teacher naturalist at the Harris Center. And I have a background in entomology, so I always try to answer insect questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenna. I have to say, when Jenna gives some answers, I'm always just blown away by the insect world. It's so different than the mammal world, which is the area that I know a little bit about. Margaret, you won't be answering any questions, but you sure do something special for us.
Right. I make the pages look pretty, all the slides, all the photos that come in and the text that comes in. I get to format everything, and it's a blast. So,
all right, thanks, Margaret. And Karen Seaver.
Hey, happy Earth Day. I'm Karen Seaver, and I am an ecologist at the Harris Center, and I just popped in from an Earth Day event on campus at Keene State, and it is a chilly Earth Day out there. But they offered some vegan spread, and that was very well received. So that was a really neat thing to see how many people were raving about the vegan foods. So I love everything about nature and consider myself kind of a generalist. But in these forums, I typically field plant questions as best I can.
Thank you, Karen. That's great. And last but not least, Jeremy. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hey, everyone. I'm Jeremy Wilson. I'm the director at the Harris Center, and I tune in to try and answer tree questions when they arise.
That's great. Now you have met all of the panelists. I haven't seen John Benjamin. He might show up a little later. If he does, he usually fields our mushroom questions. But we're going to get started because we have a super packed show tonight. And I just want everybody to take a minute and look at this beautiful collage of photographs put together by Brett and then Margaret, who made it look so beautiful. And if anybody out there sent in any of these photographs, thank you so much. They really make the Harris Center's Ask a Naturalist pop. All right, what do we got on tap? Ooh, okay. These vandalized signs, and I like that it's in quote, nailed to a tree at a height of approximately 8 feet, were along a hiking trail in Sunderland, Mass. The length of the very narrow marks are 1/2 to 3/4 inch in length. The signs about 5 by 5 inches in overall size. My suspicion is a 4-legged vandal, perhaps. Who and why? And this was sent in by Pam. And Pam is 100% right. I bet, Phil, you've seen this as your work on managing lands for Audubon, and this is not an uncommon sign to find. And Pam is right. It is a 4-legged vandal, and it's a vandal that has a need to chew. It's kind of built into its system. It has 2 front incisors on top and 2 bottom incisors on the bottom and it has to keep chewing, because if it doesn't, those incisors just keep growing and growing and growing, and they'd eventually would grow like into the animal. So this is a member of the rodent family. All rodents have this need to chew or gnaw, and my guess is that this is gnawed upon by one of our squirrels, who really go to town on chewing. And you might know this if you've ever had any squirrel problems in your own home. They'll chew through metal, copper, wiring, you name it, they'll chew it. Phil, I'm just wondering if you have anything you want to add from your experience handling trail signs.
Yeah, so when I started on my job, I had to put up a lot of these aluminum tags, and I thought for the longest time, an embarrassingly long time, that somebody was meticulously going around with a key and scratching the corners of these signs. This is not something I had a field guide to figure out who made the sign. So I thought there was one person who was going out there to every trail and scratching up these signs. I've never caught the squirrel in the act, but I deduced that it had to be a rodent after some time.
That's good.
But we ought to set up some trail cameras on trail signs.
That's a really cool idea. I want to just add that there's a little bit of evidence that perhaps they really like aluminum. That's one of their favorite things. And many trail signs are indeed aluminum. It's cheaper than steel. And that's important when you're setting up trails, because it's already an expensive thing to do. So there's some evidence that they not only gnaw on aluminum, but they're drawn to it because of some of the aluminum kind of minerals oxidized, but I couldn't find anything to really prove that that's what was happening. That was just some theories that are floating around. But if you come across this sign that it is being chewed on with their top and bottom teeth, so both their top and bottom front incisors have enough growth in them to last their lifetime, and they keep growing because they have to, because they're eating all the time. So it would wear their teeth down if they didn't keep growing. So they have all the tooth they need for their life, but if they don't gnaw, their teeth would actually grow and keep growing, and it would eventually curve and kill them. So that's the need to gnaw. Maybe one reason to not be a squirrel. Okay, I forgot to mention in this edition of our Earth Day Ask a Naturalist, we have some questions for you. And this is question number 1. So we're going to ask you this question. It'll be a poll. So true or false, climate change affects the sex of turtles? That's the question. So we are getting 94% people voting for true and 6% voting for false. So I'm going to ask Brett if you want to explain this.
Yeah, so most animals that we know about, mammals, birds, snakes, the sex determination, whether they're male or female, is a genetic thing. It happens in their chromosomes. But turtles are really interesting in that the sex determination is actually a result of the temperature at which the eggs incubate. So warmer temperatures favor warmer temperatures favor females, cooler temperatures favor males. And so you might even have in one nest, maybe it's warmer at the top or the bottom, or probably warmest in the middle. So you might have female turtles hatching from the middle of a nest and male turtles from the top and the bottom. And so so there are concerns that in a warming climate, as temperature continues to rise, that we could have a skewed sex ratio, and that we would have maybe many more female turtles, especially in some places, than male turtles. Often you have for many species, a sex ratio skewed in the other way, where there are more males than females. So it remains to be seen what will happen as a result of climate change with this. Female turtles tend to be disproportionately affected by things like roadkill, because they have to seek out land in which to lay their eggs, and so they can be hit by cars. So it may be that producing more female turtles from nests helps to balance out some other effects that humans are having on turtles. And it's hard to know, but it is a pretty wild fact about turtles that it's not the genetics in the egg, it's the temperature at which the egg incubates. So
Wow.
Aaron Seaver, you probably teach about this in your classes. Is there anything that you would want to add?
I think you hit the main points. I think that, and this is a trait that's common to many reptiles. So it's a broadly represented trait in a lot of evolutionary lineages. So there's concern that there could be lots of differing effects from alternate sex ratios, and also the phenology of emerging from the nest, the incubation timelines, and there could be a dysynchronicity with the food web that there are in the ecosystem that they're being hatched out into. But it's one of the things of how, you know, temperature is such a fundamental attribute of the environment, that so many organisms have many genes that are tuned to temperature. So when you tinker with that, you tinker with, you know, the fundamental nature of a lot of these species.
Wow, thank you both so much for answering that, and thanks to all of you for taking the quiz. We have a couple of more quizzes built in, but now here's another question. These two trees are on Lampman Road near Bonds Corner Road in Harrisville. One tree is shredded up quite high. Can bears get that high? The other one looks like it has been chewed like a corn cob. I thought porcupine, but no branches to sit on. Your thoughts from Lita. All right, so we get this type of question from time to time. Let's go back to the first slide that shows the high up spot. That is pretty high up for a bear, and it's probably, as the person who knows mammal stuff, that's probably not bear sign. It's just not, doesn't look beary to me. It doesn't look, there's no marks behind it or coming down from it. There's no bark pulled down. So I'm gonna ask Phil to think about this. Phil Brown, is this birds?
Yeah, that's a good question. This one's a little tricky to me. It looks like it's at the height where it is above where at least ground dwelling mammals would be able to reach. You know, could it be something that climbed up and chewed the bark? You know, so you have to think about the motivations for what would this creature presumably be after in the tree. And we do know that pileated woodpeckers do a lot of heavy sort of damage to trees like this. However, the shredded part was a little bit of, it kind of threw me a little bit, because it does look like the bark was just so peely. That could be a couple of things though. That could be just the way the fibers are held together. It could be very wet wood, so it's not coming off the tree completely. But generally woodpeckers are after something like grubs or ants inside the tree. Definitely the second photo looked more woodpecker-like to me. Yeah, this one. So I'm just going to ask here, the chips on the left, is that associated with the tree on the right? We don't know. Okay.
We don't know.
It might be that
Sure,
first
so-
photo, actually.
So those chips are pretty typical of woodpecker damage. So pileated woodpeckers they're the biggest of the woodpeckers. They're about 16 inches in height. They have massive bills. They create a lot of big chips because those bills are so powerful. And they're going after primarily carpenter ants. So you can usually see inside of a tree the galleries that the ants are using within the trees. And they're kind of like these little chambers inside the tree. Sometimes different colors too. Yeah, that shows it pretty nicely. Shows maybe where the woodpecker went a little bit deeper in to find the ant galleries, and certainly some pecking marks on the inner bark. So yeah, that would be my guess, that would be a pileated woodpecker. There are a few other woodpeckers in the area that are also pretty substantial in size. The hairy woodpecker is the other one I think of that goes a little bit deeper because of its bill being pretty large. And a lot of the other woodpeckers are feeding on grubs, and some of them are doing bark flecking, but these ones are really going deep for some sort of grubs or ants inside the tree. So yeah, I would come down to between a pileated and a hairy woodpecker on this one.
That's great. I'm going to just respond to, because there was a question about could it have been a porcupine, and porcupines feed on the inner bark of living trees. And so if you find kind of markings on a tree that are on a dead tree, it's definitely not a porcupine because they're after the inside bark to eat it. A bear, when it marks a tree or when it's involved with a tree, it's sometimes marking it for territory. You might see scratch marks or bite marks or kind of a combination. Or sometimes it'll be into a tree for the same reason that the pileated woodpeckers are. It's getting the bugs. And the one that was so high up, that was just a little too high for a bear to get up there and not leave any other sign. And I do think that it was the way the stringy bark was. I think that's just the tree. Sometimes the tree bark is fibrous and stringy. So I thought that too. So, all right. I hope that was a helpful answer. It's a really cool photographs. Thank you so much, Phil. Let's see what our next question is. Aha, okay. This happens to be a turn the tables. Don't play it yet because I want to let everybody know this is for a prize. It is Earth Day. So today we're giving out a prize. The first answer in the chat that is most correct will win the hat, a Harris Center hat. And I will, let's just see, let's listen. So here it goes.
Could you hear it?
Okay. Yeah, we could hear it. Can you play it again? And I want to just give everybody, in case you didn't see, it's a nocturnal sound, a nighttime audio. All right, play it again. We have some guesses coming in. Okay. All right, we do have a correct answer. What we are hearing, Pat, you are the winner. It is a porcupine. It is making a kind of squealing noise before it would go on. It's really good. So Pat, if you can send your mailing address to Miles privately in the chat, that'll be great. We can send you a hat. So you can do that. And thanks to everybody who tried a guess, and people had really good guesses. A fox, it definitely was foxish, or maybe some sort of bird calling, begging for food. But in fact, porcupines make a wide variety of sounds. And that's just one of the sounds that you can hear a porcupine make. Especially this time of year, they seem like a little bit more vocal. So thank you to Eric for sending in that sound. And thank you for everybody who played. And Pat, congratulations on winning a Harris Center hat. Yeah. Oh, Phil, can you add that? They sound remarkably similar to a saw-whet owl.
Yeah, saw-whet owls have a lot of different vocalizations, and they've been pretty common in the area this winter and spring, especially as they're passing through in migration. So that's, yeah, that one had me fooled. That sounds like some calls that I had this spring.
Interesting. Well, I mean, my thought was porcupine. I know, Brett, you did a little bit of research too on it, and we came up with porcupine, but maybe we have to think about that. Maybe it's a saw-whet. Pat, we'll count you as the winner, and then for this time next month we'll do a check-in. Maybe we'll do a side-by-side sound comparison of a saw-whet and a porcupine, and then play the one in the middle. Miles is nodding. He likes that idea. All right. Onwards and forwards on Earth Day today. Here's another one. This is really cool. I'm going to read this and then we'll listen. Here is a recording of a bird I heard on Jeffrey's Neck in Ipswich, Mass. It was high in a tree between a field and a salt marsh. I could not see it, but it had a great call. Maybe your bird person can help me identify the bird on Ask a Naturalist, from Tony. So Phil, get ready. Kind of like the wind, but all right, Phil, what the heck is that?
Yeah, so this is becoming a very common question in our area this year. because this bird, there were actually 3 different species that I heard on that recording just now, and they were going back and forth a little bit. One was singing, and then there was a pause, and the other one sang. But the loud one that was repetitive, and I'm not going to try to imitate it, but it sings in little 2 and 3 note slurs, is a Carolina wren, and that's becoming a bird species that's moving north. It's been, like its name implies, it's a southern bird. It's a small songbird, about 5 inches, a little bigger than a chickadee, and you'll start to hear these birds moving into our area. And it just seems like in the past year, we had a big influx of them. Not sure where they came from, but they're hard to see. They're little brown birds. They hide out in the brush and the shrubs, but they're super loud, like wrens usually are. And they have complex songs. And it's not just one song too. They'll sing a variety of different types, 5 or 6 different songs on on one given day. I have one nesting just outside my home window here, so it's taken over the Phoebe nest from last year. It's pretty interesting how this happened. So yeah, get ready for some strange bird sounds, but generally the Carolina wren likes to repeat 2 to 3 note slurs. So it'll do a 2 to 3 noted call that repeats itself, and it's very loud and it's hard to see. So it probably wasn't at the top of the tree either, but it could have been.
Wow, I love it. Okay,
Very
Phil.
good. Yeah.
I mean, I listened to that and I heard one bird, but you're saying that there were 3 different species. So besides the Carolina wren, what were the other 2 birds you heard?
I heard a house finch that was kind of counter singing with the wren. So they both wanted to be audible enough for, the females that were around or other males that were singing to try to establish the territory. So they take turns, they switch on and off, and it's it's a timing thing. So they don't both speak at the same time. So 2 different species taking turns like that. So house finch, and I heard a song sparrow near the end of the song recording. So the Carolina wrens nest in some strange places. They've nested in people's garage or potted plants. Things that hang near people's houses are a favorite spot for Carolina wrens. So maybe put up something strange in a covered place and see if you might have a visitor take up.
Wow, that was so cool. Thank you, Phil. I mean, I just feel like, and I'm sure some of people out there feel like, I hear very little of what Phil hears, and it's so cool that that he's so trained to hear those and able and to share it with us. It makes me want to be a better listener. So that's my homework for the Earth Day weekend. Play it again. Can you just play it again one more time, Miles? That was good. Wow. Now that Phil pointed it out, put your thumb up if you heard 3 different birds now. So cool. Thank you, Phil. You opened our ears up tonight and all really appreciate it. Yeah. Okay, here's the next Earth Day quiz, question number 2. This will also be a poll. It says, what percentage of the world's food crops depend on animal pollinators? And we have a 0, so none, 20%. 35%, 50%, or 90%. All right, let's close down the polls. And we have coming in first is at 90%. That's 57% of you thought that was true. 50% was another thought, and that was 22% of you voted that way. 35%, 16% of us voted that way, and 20% was 5% of us voted that way. That's a lot of percentages I just said. Nobody voted for 0%, but here's the answer. And I'm going to ask Jenna to talk about it. It says 3/4 of the world's flowering plants and about 35% of the world's food crops depend on animal pollinators to reproduce. More than 3,500 species of native bees help increase crop yields. Some scientists estimate that 1 out of every 3 bites of food we eat exists because of animal pollinators like bees, butterflies, moths, birds, bats, beetles, and other insects. Jenna, since this is a lot to do with insects, do you have anything you'd want to share?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that people overestimate often is because we eat so much grain on this planet, and grain is not something that relies upon pollination by insects. So I think that's why so many people tend to overestimate, if that makes sense. So the things that are going to be reliant on insect pollinators are the fruits, many things that we call vegetables. Obviously, a lot of nuts, things like that are going to rely on that. But then when you get to, things like oats and wheat and rice, it's a whole different ball of wax. So that's why the food crop piece is just a little different than what most people think.
Cool.
So
Thanks, Jenna.
no problem.
Do any of our other panelists want to chime in on the pollinator question? Brett has a question. She says, are grains wind pollinated?
I think almost all of them are, but it could be that someone who knows more about plants, maybe Karen Siever, knows more
And most
about.
of the main ones like wheat, corn, oats, all wind pollinated.
Yeah.
Really cool. Wow. Learning things here on Ask a Naturalist. This is awesome. All right, let's see what our next question could be tonight. Okay. Oh my gosh, look how sweet that picture is. Here's what happened. My granddaughter and I found on the road a very small turtle about the size of a $50. We moved it into a grassy area which led down to a river. Is there anything else we could do to offer it some protection, especially from predators? Thank you. From Nancy. Brett, tell us a little bit about this little creature and what people can do to be helpful and help this animal and other animals like it.
Yeah, so there's kind of two reasons we might find turtles on the road, and kind of relates to different parts of their life history. So we're coming into what I always think of as turtle season in the late spring, when larger turtles, adult female turtles, are seeking out nesting sites. They're looking for sandy, loose, well-drained soils in which to deposit their eggs. And these days, many of them are finding those sites in road shoulders. So people, I think, often assume that turtles are looking for water, and sometimes they want to help turtles, and they kind of make that assumption and carry maybe an adult painted turtle to water when that's not where that turtle is trying to go. That in May and June and early July, adult turtles are trying to be on land for a little while. So if you see an adult turtle coming up in the next few months, and it's safe for you to pull over and move it across the road, that is a huge thing that you can do to help that turtle, because roadkill is a major issue for turtles, and turtles take a long time to reach reproductive maturity. For some species, they could be 20, 25 years in the making before they're able to get out there and lay eggs. And so if they're hit by cars, it takes them a long time to replace themselves in the population, or for those ones who are hit by cars to be replaced. So if you see adult turtles, move them across the road, always in the direction they were heading, but don't assume that they're needing to be in water or near water. This case that Nancy wrote us about is something that happens in late summer, early fall, as well as right now, which is hatchling turtles, really tiny turtles, the size of, as she said, $50 or quarters, who have hatched out maybe from these roadside nests, and they are looking to return to the safety of the water. So every year there's a route I walk from my house that's near Harrisville Pond, and it breaks my heart because I see a lot of snapping turtle hatchlings dead on the road. And snapping turtle nests, 95% of them are eaten by raccoons and foxes and other predators before they ever make it to the hatchling phase. So to think about how hard it was to get to the point where you have a hatchling turtle, and then for it all to end on a road like that is really heartbreaking. So Nancy did for sure the right thing by moving that turtle off the road. First and foremost, move them off the road if it's safe for you to do so. And then with hatchling turtles like this, if there's a clear water body that is very close to where you are, I think that it's safe to move that turtle into that water body. So if they're hatched out right next to a pond or a slow moving stream or a wetland, you can bring them to the water's edge to give them that little extra safety from predators. But that's only true of hatchlings, not of the bigger turtles, is what I would say.
Wow, Brett, thank you so much. And it's like perfect timing as we're moving into turtle season. And I know that all of us are probably the types of people that would stop and help turtles cross the road. So be careful if you're doing that for yourself and cars. So, all right, let's see what is our next one. Oh man, this one, I love this one. This is right up my alley. Found this skull in the woods near McDowell Dam. Fox? No other bones or carcass nearby. What kind of predator? Note large fracture at the base of the skull. Fascinating teeth too. Yes, this is a really great photograph. And I have to tell you, it is not a fox. It has too short a snout. It's like a short snouted animal. So if you saw a canine snout, it would be longer and the snout would be elongated. But it is an animal that is in the group of a carnivora. And you can tell that by those big canines. So Miles, if you could point out to those sharp canine teeth right there. Yeah, those are the canines. And it's got a little bit of gray fur on its chinny chin and some black lips. Which, you know, most mammals, wild mammals have sort of a blackish lip, and maybe the gray fur faded. So you have to really look at the teeth and the shape of the skull. And what we're seeing here is an animal that is of the omnivore variety. So it's got incisors. Those are the very front teeth that you see that look kind of like human teeth. It's a little creepy. Then it's got those sharp canines. And then it has 3 sharp carnassial teeth. Those are kind of shredders. They shred up the meat. But then if you look behind it, it's got molars. They're kind of similar to our own mouth style. We've got our incisors and our canines and kind of sharp carnassials, and then some premolars and then molars. This is not unsimilar. This is an omnivore, and this is actually a raccoon. So we've got here a raccoon skull. As for what might have killed it, hard to know. It's hard to even know if the skull cracking that Jim points out, the large fracture at the base of the skull, if that came, you know, before death or after death, we don't really know. So not sure what killed it, but a really super cool find. I like the kind of fact that it still has some of its skin on it too. I think it's really neat. So thanks so much for sending that in, Jim. What a great find. And I don't know, do any panelists have anything they want to add? All right, we'll move on then. Okay. Here, this is really cool. I know that great blue herons are not rare in our area, but this one caught my attention because it landed at the top of a 50-foot plus pine about 130 yards from our window. Our house is in Fitzwilliam, overlooks a large beaver meadow fed by Kemp Brook, which flows off Little Monadnock and the surrounding hills. I was gazing aimlessly at the meadow when a large bird caught my attention, and until I grabbed my binoculars, I thought it would be a hawk or a turkey vulture. I've never seen a great blue heron land so high up, and indeed it took a few moments and wing beats for this one to get its balance in the high, thin branches. Is this unusual behavior? Phil, is this unusual? What's
Not at
going
all.
on?
Yeah, but it is a strange place to see a heron when you're used to seeing them feeding in the water in a coastal salt marsh or at the edge of a pond or something. That's where they find their food. But herons will go up in trees to nest. First of all, they do nest in usually in dead trees. They'll build large stick nests in beaver swamps, especially. Their nests are usually tucked away in places intentionally to keep ground predators away. So if they have water around a dead tree in the water, that would be ideal for a heron. However, this one's not nesting. This one's in a live pine tree, it looks like. And it may have just stopped off to survey the land and see if it was a good place to hunt. in the absence of any obvious dead perch or snag. And this sort of behavior does make me think of migratory great blue herons, which we're still within that window, even though many are nesting right now. Especially along the coast, there are migratory herons right now that are still ending up, coming down in certain places that it's a little bit by chance where they end up in migration. So they'll, they could be in a developed suburban area, and they might not have a good feeding area nearby, so they'll have to just rest in a tree. Basically, being in a tree is their chance to stay protected from us, which is one of their biggest problems. Herons have a very sensitive, they're very sensitive to human disturbance. So if you ever try to get close to one, you'll find out very quickly that, several hundred feet away, a heron's going to fly away if it sees you. So they're very skittish. They don't want to be around anything that's dwelling on the ground that could be a potential predator. Not a lot will eat them, but bald eagles will actually take them out of the sky sometimes. That has happened and been reported before. So it is possible they were also just getting up high so they can survey and make sure they didn't have any other aerial predators swinging by their way. So.
Wow, Phil, that's just remarkable. So bald eagles have been recorded of catching great blue herons in mid-flight.
Yes, and picking them off of nests as well.
Wow.
I think great horned owls may also sometimes. They nest in the same proximity as great horned owls a lot in these beaver swamps. So some of that might be for protection for the herons, but they can't get too content because they have to keep an eye out for the top predator.
Man, that's really cool. Thank you so much. And thanks to Jim for sending in this photograph. And very cool. I'm going to be looking up at the tops of trees for some great blue herons now too. It's great.
I have a quick follow-up, Phil.
Sure.
How quickly do the young blue herons develop? I'm just thinking, like, that's such a large bird. How fast do those legs grow?
Oh yeah, good question. Yeah, they're born with pretty big legs and pretty big bills, and those two features grow pretty quickly because that's how they find food. And the rest of them, it only takes a matter of weeks to months for them to reach full adult size, like all birds, really. All birds around here anyway. So by mid to late June, there should be nearly full-grown herons in a lot of our heron rookeries and beaver swamps in the Monadnock region, and they're sitting on eggs right now. So it all happens very quickly.
Wow, very cool. All right. So who would expect that there would be a tracking question in the Earth Day edition of Ask a Naturalist in April, but this is probably from the last little bit of snow that we had. Who paid us a visit in yesterday's storm? Whoever it was wandered all around the yard, circling back and pausing at a lilac. Jim and Kathy from Prince William. Well, Jim and Kathy, you have one of the stars of today's show. We just heard what we thought might have been an audio clip of it making that squeaky sound or squawky sound. This is a little porcupine footprint that you've got here, and you can tell because of the kind of curvature of those toenails on the bigger picture. And then the footprints themselves, if you look at the track where it shows the two, they're sort of almost like as though it's pigeon-toed, turned in. And that's really indicative of porcupine tracks. It's sort of a pigeon-toed walk and a waddle. So you had a porcupine, and this is the time of the year that people do see porcupines out in their yards. They've spent the winter eating the inner bark of hemlock trees, and they're probably pretty tired of eating hemlock. So as soon as the grass begins to green up, they come to people's yards, and they'll just graze on the fresh green grasses coming up. And the snow was probably like a surprise, like, oh no, where'd the grass go? I got to go back and eat the hemlock. So maybe it was pausing at the lilac to see if it could nibble some inner bark of the lilac. And I know that for sure people have been finding them in their yards, because I know, Miles, you've had some close encounters of late. You have a big, beautiful field. Tell us what's been happening.
Well, pretty regularly in the evening when I take the dog out, we've been encountering porcupine on the edge of the field. And once it senses us, it scurries into the woods.
Yeah, so be careful with your dogs on the edges of fields right now, and yourself too, especially at twilight if you're out walking. And I guess what I would say is this is just temporary, that you'll see a porcupine out kind of all hours of the day. Right now, they're just really hungry for fresh greens. As soon as other foods begin to come in, fruits, crops, things like that, they'll kind of switch back to their more nocturnal behavior, but you can see them in the day, in kind of the beginning and ends of the days right now, sometimes right in the middle of the day. So porcupine, word of the day. All right. Ooh, yeah. 3 fresh bear tracks across our front yard after the April 16th snowstorm. By noon the following day, both the snow and the bear tracks were gone, from Jill in Harrisville. I love that. And it's such a just beautiful photographs of the bear's footprints. You can really see the front foot smaller, the back foot plantigrade. They walk kind of on their full foot like we do. And the fact that they're up and around on April 16th is a really good reminder to everybody to take your feeders, your bird feeders in, because that might be why they've come to your backyard. They might smell if you have bird seed up, they are smelling it. They have incredible senses of smell. If you had a bird feeder up and you have like bits of bird seed on the ground, they'll come and feed on that too. They're starving. Just think about how hard it would be to go all those winter months without eating, and you're really big, 200 pounds, 150 pounds, and you haven't eaten. So when you wake up, you're really hungry, and that will drive you to enter people's yards. And again, this is behavior that will change once more food becomes available. So Phil, I wondered if you wanted to add anything about bears and bird feeding, because that seems to be kind of a ongoing discussion that people have. Should I take my feeders in? Should I leave them out? What's your thought on this, Phil?
Yeah, there is a mixed reaction to bird feeding in the spring, especially. New Hampshire Fish and Game recommends by April 1st, or is it April 15th, you take your bird feeders in permanently and stop feeding altogether. And that's the surefire way to make sure you don't have bear encounters, at least at your bird feeder. You could still have issues at the compost or whatever else, your chicken coop. But bird seed is an easy, free meal at this point, especially if you're leaving your feeders out at night. So take them in at night at the very least. That's what we do. And we've been able to really avert just about every potential bear encounter in our backyard. However, a little bit site specific. Certain houses and neighborhoods have more problems with bears than others. So you have to be aware of your bear's patterns and try to respond to that as best as you can. For the most part, we have nocturnal bears here that are getting into feeders in the neighborhood. But if yours start showing up during the day, yeah, you'll want to stop feeding birds at that point.
Really great advice, Phil. And this is just such a great photograph, Jill. Thanks for sending it in. I just love how you can see the whole footprint. All right, let's see what we got going on. Okay, on our winter walks, we wondered why some trees have multiple trunks. I did a little investigation, but would like to hear the Harris Center expert explanation. Thanks, Madeline. So Jeremy, this is right up your alley. Your specialty is forest and trees. What can you tell us about multiple trunks?
This is a great question and a great photo, and it's a really good example of how trees and plants, for that matter, but particularly trees and perennials that live through many years, store their history and their form. And so you can really do some detective work out in the woods to try and figure out, well, how did this forest arise and how did it grow? And this is just one of those things you can look for. So it's obviously multiple stems growing together like this, and it's almost always associated, not almost always, because there are a few exceptions, but it's typically associated with some kind of stump sprouting. So most of the hardwoods in our area are really prolific stump sprouters. And so if the tree blows over in the wind, or if it is cut down, or if it's in a fire potentially, the tree will send up lots and lots of stump sprouts or sprouts associated with the portion of the stem that's left and living. Typically, it will be many more than the 3. So I'm looking at the oak example that's sort of just to the left of center of the screen. And typically it's many more than that would start off from a stump. And then over time, the sprouts would compete with each other for light and other resources. And what you're seeing is the winners of that battle. So maybe there were 10 or 15 stump sprouts from this particular tree stump, and 3 have emerged as the clear winners. And as they continue to grow, another one of them may drop off at some point. But when you're walking through forests where you see multiple stems coming from sort of a single area like this, you know that there was some kind of disturbance that led to either the breakage of the tree stem at that point, or the cutting down of the tree stem at that point, or even potentially the burning of the stem, which killed the larger stem. That's in the history of this stand. That's how this particular stand arose. Most of our conifers don't do any stump sprouting. There's a few examples from different regions that do. Redwood's probably the most famous stump sprouter that we have in terms of softwoods in this country. Eucalypts are another good example of a gymnosperm, because they're a gymnosperm actually, so they're in that same family as most of our conifers. But there's several examples of sprouters as well from that group. So it's a great way of seeing it. I'd interpret this as this was probably cut down because of where the different stump sprouts are emerging, pretty low down to the ground like it would be from a stump. And you can see that it's in multiple species. So looks like the beech has some stump sprouts there that's to the right, and then maybe that's a red maple in the back there, and that has a stump sprout. So that at some point this forest had a pretty substantial harvest event in it, and this is how the trees have responded to that.
Wow, thanks, Jeremy. That was really cool. It's like really neat to be able to go into the forest and look at that and think about what happened there, and know that something must have happened to have so many stumps sprouting in one spot. So thank you. And thanks for sending in that picture. It's a great picture. Oh my goodness. This is like, whoa, what a celebration of poop this is. This pile of scat was located within the floodplain of a brook in Whately, Mass. No bones or hair visible, but plenty of vegetation. Who done it? From Pam. You guys, there's many of you out there that have been attending the Ask a Naturalist, or maybe you just have some ideas. I'm going to ask you guys, while I'm kind of rambling on about this scat, to put in the chat what you think it is. And I want you to take a look. It doesn't seem to have any noticeable bones, or it doesn't have any noticeable bones, but it might have some fur. It definitely has vegetation. A lot of people are thinking it might be bear scat. Yeah, it's big. That ruler, the placement of the ruler, Pam, you get an A+ for that. That's perfect. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people suggest bear. Maybe a bobcat is one. It's really big. It's kind of unformed. It has some formage to it, but it looks unformed. So what we are seeing here, I think, is if it was something like otter, you might expect to see shells or scales in it. And there's a question, is it one animal or is it 2 animals? I think it's one animal that had a lot to eat, and this wouldn't surprise me. I do think that bear was the animal that kind of came to my mind too. And at this time of the year, when bear are really hungry, and especially if they're a nursing mother, a lot of times what they do is they go down to the wetland and they feed on the emerging greens that are coming up. And while they're feeding on the emerging greens, they send their babies up a nearby large tree. It's called a babysitting tree. And this gives the mother a chance to really eat a lot of fresh greens. Now, and not to be graphic or anything, but when you eat a lot of fresh greens in your own diet, this can occasionally happen to your own scat where it comes out unformed. And that's what I think is going on here. I spent a lot of time blowing this picture up and looking at it and seeing what is in it. And I noticed it was a lot of plant material. There is a lot of vegetation in it, and it looks pretty succulent to me, and it looked green. The only type of green, super green vegetation are in those wetlands. Those are the first things to kind of green up. So, oh, Pam's saying she spent a lot of time really looking close at it too, and noticed also that it had vegetation. So I'm thinking that it might be a bear, but I wouldn't like bet my whole house on it. And the reason I'm going bear as opposed to other animals is its size and kind of the behavior of bear at this time of the year, where they're, especially the female, are feeding in those emerging wetlands. So I'm thinking bear, but I don't know, could be persuaded another way. I'd have to smell it. Just joking. Phil Brown, you're thinking like me. That's what I was going to say. There's some old joke about that. All right, let's see what we've got. Oh, this is one of my favorite plants. Okay, I've noticed over the years that the local orchid rattlesnake plantain is often associated with birch trees, even roots after the tree is gone. Is there a reason for this? 3 recent pictures taken on a rail trail on April 6th. They have been in the spot for at least 3 to 4 years. Pick the best picture you want. The birch tree is gone, but the large roots stretch across the trail. From Jean. So I'm going to turn this over to Karen Seaver. Karen, what can you tell us about this beautiful plant?
This is such a great plant that's really one of the maybe the few plants that's famous more for its leaves and its flower. Has really distinctive venation pattern on the leaves. And like Jean mentioned, it's a local orchid species and has very, the typical kind of fleshy, hairy, pubescent, as they're called, leaves that a lot of orchids have. What's interesting about a rattlesnake plantain, it's just to note the common name, it's very different than what's called common plantain, which is the plant that you often see in your yard, which is actually a non-native plant species. It's not to the point where it's become invasive. It's actually naturalized pretty well in terms of not taking over native habitats. Rattlesnake plantain is typically recognized as being a late successional plant. And what's interesting there is it seems to be on nearby, those look like yellow birch roots to me, which is sort of a mid-successional species. So I don't think this is a plant that typically associates with any particular tree species. I looked into that a little bit. I was curious if there was mycorrhizal connection where there might be a fungal intermediate partner, and that's maybe something to ask John Benjamin in the future. I think it's definitely the case where you will find this plant in the same place year after year. They reproduce by seed, but they also reproduce through lateral reproduction through what's called the rhizome, which is sort of the very surface just below the soil surface, that lateral root structure. So you often see clusters of rattlesnake plantain because of that. And in that case, those might be like literal direct clonal relations to each other. So if you see clusters of these, it's really great to try to leave them in place because they're a fairly slow growing plant, as most orchids are.
Wow, thanks, Karen. That's such a great explanation, and it's such a fabulous plant to be able to find. And I saw, Brett, you saw one today. I saw one today too. So rattlesnake plantain must be on our mind. All right, let's get to, I think this, yeah.
Just a quick comment on this. I know that this site well, and I think that the roots are still alive actually, and they're associated with some big tooth aspens that are growing nearby. So I don't know what that means, but I actually don't think it's birch roots. There was an old birch in the area, but I think the roots are associated with the big tooth aspen that's growing there.
Wow, fascinating. We'll have to check into that when John comes back next month. We'll give him a test to see if we can answer it. All right, this is our last question for this evening, and I know we're going a little over, but I hope you'll stay on because this is really cool. This is a great photograph. I occasionally notice springtails congregating on a stick or a rock. Do you know why they might be doing this? Also, I've heard differing views on whether they can direct their movements. Some say that they fling themselves randomly, but this grouping seems to indicate they can choose where they land. Any thoughts about that? So Miles is going to play this. Let's see what we've got. Wow. I'm not sure that I saw any of the springtails move, but it's definitely a pretty close-up view. Oh,
I have to say, when I watched it a couple of days ago, they were crawling for sure. And then you can see some of them fling up towards the camera kind of, but it didn't really quite play seamlessly.
So Jenna, what can you tell us about springtails?
Well, I will be brief here because there's a lot to tell and it's 6:30, so I'll try and cut it short. But springtails they used to be classed as an insect and they are no longer. They are seen as too primitive, so they don't have all of the traits of they're like a almost like a pre-insect. So they have 6 legs, they have an exoskeleton, but they have these interesting traits that they don't have wings, they molt continuously through their whole life. So they're very fragile little critters. We have, well, we don't really know exactly how many species we have, but they live mostly in the leaf litter. There are about 30 to 40 species in New England, we think. That was the last thing I read. And the idea about if they can direct their movements, they can direct their crawling, which is what they've done here in these pictures, but then they're flinging, they have a little, it literally looks like a little jackknife on their tip of their abdomen. And when they need to escape, like from the camera person, they will sort of spring their springtail and they'll just go flying. And it is random. That is random. They can't control that, but they can control their crawling. And the reason that it is thought that they gather like this in these big collections, it's really looking for the exact right environment to be successful. They're very delicate and their exoskeleton is very, very thin. So they have to make sure they don't dry out. They have to make sure they don't get too wet. So in this situation, the thinking, of course, if we could ask the springtails, that would be great. But if we can't do that, the thinking is that they gather in like the perfect environmental conditions in these big groups. And it's not related to mating because they actually have some really interesting mating behaviors that have to do with dancing. They do not, there's no internal fertilization. They're more primitive than that. So the male has to place a little packet of sperm and there's some dancing that happens. And then when the female decides she likes it, she'll go and sort of stand over the packet of sperm and up it goes into her body. So not mating here. This is likely just they really loved the temperature and the humidity in that particular spot.
Wow, Jenna. I mean, I almost think that next month we just have to have springtails and that's it for the hour because
just the
whole idea of them dancing just is kind of such a great little image.
David Attenborough, there's one of these, I think it's Life in the Undergrowth, has a great, I mean, his camera people are amazing. Have what different species than this one of Columbula, which is the group that they're in, as opposed to being an insect, and and they set this great music, you know.
Oh, that's great. All right, everybody has a little bit of homework. David Attenborough's Springtail music video, I guess, and we'll all talk about it next month. So thank you guys so much for coming tonight. This is our end of Ask a Naturalist. I always forget when the next one is, and I always ask Brett because she always knows these things. Brett, when's our next one?
Next one, May 13th.
Phew,
So it's less than a month away. So if you're sad for this to end, it's not that long till the next time.
that's great. Keep sending us your questions, your audio tapes, your scat finds, anything, and we'll be very happy to hopefully be able to answer the question. Thank you guys so much for showing up tonight, and happy Earth Day to everybody. But do remember, it is true, Earth Day is every day.